Hello, everyone. My name is Swami Nirmala, and my topic this morning is praying for others. I want to begin by sharing a story that happened to me many years ago. It was very unusual, made all the more so because the circumstances of it were so ordinary. I was riding in a car with Swami Kriyananda, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, and I was sitting directly behind him in the back seat. And we were both very quiet. I was trying to help him rest, and he was preparing for some program. I don't remember which one. And we were both quietly looking out the window on the right side of the car. Well, we've all had that experience many, many times in life, watching people walk down the sidewalk in a busy city. But this time it was different. There were huge skyscrapers, and the light that finally filtered down from the sky to the street was very gray and flat. If light could be dead, it was dead light. But the most strange thing about it was that it was as though the veil had been pushed aside and the people on the street had such tortured expressions on their faces. There was so much suffering, clearly visible. It was as though we were looking through a window at an astral hell. It was so striking that I broke the silence and said to Swami, "Swami, are you seeing what I'm seeing?" And I was hoping he would say, "What? I don't see anything." But he immediately said, "Yes, these people were born to suffer." Well, nowadays we see so much suffering. The technology has advanced so that there's hardly a minute that goes by between the reality of what happened and when it's broadcast to everyone. There's so much hatred, hate crimes, injustice, pain everywhere. And what we can do in situations like driving down the street and seeing this suffering, seeing it on the news or in person, what we can do is practice a little technique that Swami gave us as singers when we would go out to perform his music. He would say, when you go out on stage, don't let your aura be small and wrapped tightly around you in protection. Let your aura expand. And he would say, fill the whole room with your aura. Expand your energy and your love and your vibration of God out to include the whole audience. And we can use that same technique in prayer. When we see and perceive pain out in the world or right in the news or anywhere in the world or right in front of us, we cannot shrink back, which is the natural feeling sometimes, but just open up, expand, give, include everyone, everything in that situation in an aura of God's light, His healing energy, His love. Expand out. Swami would often share visualizations or guided meditations in which he would say, if you want to feel your consciousness as space, you have to feel space in the body. So consciously expand, open up inside and outside, and feel space, freedom, soaring, open light and energy in the body and then out through the country, the world, the universe. We eventually, our destiny is that we will be one. As the festival says, you are a part of all that is. Eventually we will feel that oneness. So it's important that we practice feeling that oneness, opening ourselves up, giving energy to every creature, every person, everything, with God's light flowing through us. Yogananda gave us many wonderful healing techniques, and the most basic one is one that we do after most Ananda meditations. We rub our hands together to feel the energy in our hands. And then chanting Om, we channel our energy, which is really God's energy through us. We channel that energy. And this is a technique that these techniques, both of them, are things that don't require any special equipment. They don't require any special environment. We can rub our hands together and chant Om even mentally if we're in a situation in which we don't really want to be chanting Om loudly. We can channel that energy. We can pray for people. We can give God's light and joy anytime, anywhere. So let us make it a priority in our lives to work on being that perfect instrument for God, being that channel of His light. God knows that this world needs that love, needs that peace so desperately. And it's easy to feel helpless, to feel hopeless. Who am I? I'm just one little person. What can I possibly do against this avalanche of negativity that's happening in the world? One person can do so much if they have God's peace. Swami would often tell us that Gandhi would walk into a room of squabbling politicians, all arguing with each other, so much anger, animosity, and yet just his presence would happen and they would all fall silent. The power of his peace was so great that he could be an effect in this world. He could affect the energy of this world. As Swami would say, be a cause and not an effect. Affect the world around you. Be a cause for that growth and energy in the world. And let us take the suffering that we see and use it to motivate ourselves to grow spiritually, because the more that we can tune in to these great masters, the more that we can channel their energy out into the world. This is what we were born for. This is what our mission is. It's said that all of Krishna's soldiers are like Krishna. And if you think of the beautiful prayer that Master gave us, may thy love shine forever on the sanctuary of my devotion, and may I be able to awaken thy love in all hearts. And Swamiji had about the same prayer as he was riding on that Greyhound bus to California to meet Master after reading Autobiography of a Yogi. He prayed, Lord, let me find you so that I can share you with everyone. So our spiritual family, our spiritual DNA, in a sense, is that striving to find God so that we can share him with everyone. And let's take that suffering that we see in the world as a motivation. Swami would tell the story of when Buddha achieved enlightenment. In that moment, every person, every creature in the whole world felt a blessing. They felt uplifted in their consciousness through the Buddha's achievement, through what he had realized. And so, and Master tells us too, when we achieve liberation, 7 generations before us in our family, 7 generations after us are uplifted. We can be such a great cause in this world through the spiritual energy that we can manifest. So every time you see suffering, every time you hear a siren, you don't know what's happened or who it is, but you can send energy. Anytime that you hear of someone in trouble, send them loving, healing prayers. Make your whole life a prayer. There's the beautiful story of Frank Laubach, who wrote the book Letters of a Modern Mystic. And one time he was asked to give a prayer, an opening prayer at a big meeting, and people who heard him said it was as though he had started this prayer long ago and had been saying it to himself for many, many years. And then he stood to give the opening prayer, and that prayer just continued where it had been coming for all that time. He spoke a few minutes of that prayer, and then he was silent, but you could tell that his inner prayer continued on. His life was a continual prayer. And we have to have that kind of determination and loyalty to God to always keep referring back everything that happens to us, everything to that source. Always holding up our consciousness, listening for that still small voice within that is whispering, those whispers from eternity in our consciousness. But if we're so determined and so focused on doing our own will and the things that we need to get done and moving at high speed, we very often miss those little whisperings. I'm reminded of the story of Swami landing in the Calcutta airport many years ago, and it was the middle of the night, and people were supposed to be there to greet him and pick him up and take him where he was going to stay, and they weren't there. So after looking around for a few minutes and realizing that he was stranded, he said most people would dash off to the phone, it was only a payphone in those days, and try to find a hotel reservation, try to get a taxi. And later he found out that there was a big conference in the city and there were no vacant hotel rooms. It would have been impossible to find a hotel room that night. But instead of dashing around trying to figure it all out, he became very still and he stopped where he was and stood silently, closed his eyes and prayed, "Divine Mother, what do you have in mind?" And when he opened his eyes, there was a man standing in front of him. And the man said, "What is your good name?" And Swami replied, "Swami Kriyananda." And the man said, "Oh, I thought it must be you. Dr. Mishra, my friend, has told me so much about you." And Swami said, "Dr. Mishra, I've been wanting to meet him again and see him. I've missed him and I don't have his contact information. I didn't know how to reach him." And the man said, "Well, I can take you there now. I'm just leaving to meet him." And Swami would have missed that whole experience. He would have missed connecting again with his friend if he hadn't just gone inside to listen, to try to tune in to what God's plan was. God's will for us is always for our highest good. If we can surrender more to that will instead of our own will, then we can live as a cause and not an effect. We can pray more effectively. So that's a very good thing to tune into if we're wanting to pray for others. Another beautiful thing to work on in ourselves is to practice the Yama of non-lying by always speaking the truth. As Swami would say, the beneficial truth, not always the factual truth. But we can always speak with kindness and with compassion and with the beneficial truth. The more that we control our words and only speak what is true, the more power our words will have. And then to go deeper in ourselves and to work on our thoughts, to only think what is good and what is true. I'm trying to remember the Bible passage that I love so much, and it talks about think noble thoughts, think of the good, don't think about other negative things that are painful. Keep your mind centered on what is right and what is true. Fill your mind with nobility, with kindness, with compassion, with love. Don't allow influences that are worldly, because on a subtle level, they drag your consciousness down. So often we just want to relax. We want to just watch television or just read a novel. That's fine to do that, a little bit, but choose wisely. Always try to choose something uplifting, something that will elevate your mind. Don't allow it to get dragged down by influences. So working on thoughts, working on words, in that way, our consciousness is ready to perceive the highest, and our words and thought, if we practice non-lying, will become binding on the universe and will come true. Now that is effective prayer. I want to also just close now by telling you a little story from my own life, which was that when my father was getting ready to transition from this world, this was many, many years ago, I prayed fervently to Lahiri Mahashaya to spare my father's life. And I was praying to all the masters, but especially to him. I know you can heal him. I know you have that power. Come into his body and heal his body. And I prayed for a long time and very fervently, but the answer that I got was not the one that I wanted, but it was an answer that soothed my heart. And the answer that I received was, what about all those people who have been healed? Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. Where is Lazarus now? All of them who have been healed, they've all had to pass away from this world. It's the way of life. As the Gita says, that which is born must die, and that which is dead must be born again. Even our earth, it's very poignant to think of this, but our moon is slowly moving away from the earth. That will have a tremendous impact on all of life. And our sun, too, one day, long time from now, will burn out. The earth's core someday will cool. The earth, it's so beautiful, so full of life, someday will be just a cold rock in space. Everything has a lifespan. Everything is part of this creation, which is transitory, impermanent. So let our prayers always be, thy will be done. And let us not waste a moment of the time that has been given to us. Let us not waste a breath. Let every thought, feeling, action be guided by God. That's what we want. That's perfect joy. And let us use the time that we have been given to be God's instrument of love and blessing. And let our whole life be a prayer.